Sometimes, the last thing a child says is the only clue the world forgets. In 1997, in the poor neighborhood of East Point, Georgia, 6-year-old Amara Johnson vanished in the middle of the night. No screams, no trace. Just one strange sentence that a few neighbors still remember, "I see you." Then silence. Forever. Rayna Johnson was born and raised in East Point, a place where the American dream always felt out of reach. The youngest of 3 sisters. Her mom worked the night shift as a nurse, and her father walked out when Rayna was in 3rd grade, in her teenage years. Rayna believed she'd leave this place behind. But at 22, she became pregnant with Amara. The baby's father, a mechanic from the same neighborhood, disappeared right after the first ultrasound. From then on, everything revolved around one word: survival. Rayna didn't have a college degree, nor any close relatives she could rely on during the day. She drove a school bus, a job that demanded patience not just with the kids, but with a system that kept cutting her hours. At night, she changed uniforms and walked 2 blocks to a nail salon. Her hands often cracked from the chemicals, sometimes bleeding from cuts that never quite healed. But Rayna never complained. She said, "I can take the pain, as long as my daughter's safe." Their small apartment sat on the ground floor of an old complex that grew damp every rainy season. But Rayna did her best to make it livable with heart-shaped paper cutouts Amara made, and the smell of cinnamon she sprinkled on the floor each night before mopping. She saved every penny to buy her daughter new shoes for the first day of school. Once, instead of going to the doctor for herself, Rayna used the money to buy Amara pale yellow lipstick, the shade she called Sunlight, to neighbors. Rayna was calm and never one to complain, but only those close to her knew about the nights she'd stand on the porch, eyes locked on Amara's window. She once told a friend, "Every time I walk in and see her light on, I know I've won one more day." Rayna wasn't perfect. She lost her temper when exhausted, once forgot to buy milk after a long shift, but not once did she walk away from being a mother. That's why the night Amara disappeared wasn't just a shock. It was the collapse of an entire world Rayna had fought to build, piece by piece. Amara Johnson was the kind of child you never forget. Every morning she stood at the door in her yellow cotton dress and smiley-face sandals. A wide fabric headband always sat crooked on her head, like even she didn't care about being just right. One time, Miss Johnson from down the street said, she didn't walk, she bounced, like sunlight with legs. Amara had a wild imagination. She talked to herself, or to a jean puppet she made by hand. It used to be her mom's old shirt cut into scraps, stitched with purple thread. The puppet had no face, just 2 buttons for eyes and a crooked stitched mouth. Amara named it Miss Nowhere, she said. She's from a place grown-ups don't believe in. Every time she went out, Amara brought the puppet clutched in her hand, hidden behind her back, or tucked into her backpack. When adults asked, she'd whisper, "Miss Nowhere keeps me from being scared." She knows how to speak in silence. At first, Rayna thought it was just play, but slowly, Amara's words started to chill her. "There's someone at the window, but I told them not to come in today." Another morning, Amara asked, "If someone came and said they used to be my friend, would you let them in?" Neighbors loved Amara. She brought cookies to Miss Johnson on weekends, listened to old war stories without ever rushing her. To Mr. Matt, a widower with 3 big dogs, Amara was the only kid his dogs never barked at. She knew each by name and even made them cloth collars. "If there's an angel on this block," Mr. Matt once said, "it's that little girl." But in the days leading up to her disappearance, Amara spoke less. She sat quietly on the steps, the puppet resting still in her lap, Once, Rayna overheard her whisper, "Don't forget to bring her. She's the way home." When asked, Amara just smiled and changed the subject. She still went to school, still greeted the neighbors, but her eyes, they seemed distant, like she was preparing for a journey no adult could understand. A week before she vanished. Amara started changing in small ways. Little things, Rayna. Exhausted, barely noticed. She was still cheerful, still helped wipe the table after dinner, still whispered to Miss Nowhere. But each night, instead of falling asleep, she sat at the edge of her bed, eyes fixed on the swaying curtain. "She says she's almost here," Amara whispered. Rayna, thinking it was just a game, nodded and moved on. That Tuesday, Amara brought home a crayon drawing a square room with no windows, and a figure in the corner. The figure wore a red vest, but had no face. When Rayna asked, "Who is this?" Amara said, "They said they're your friend, but I don't believe them." It gave Rayna a bad feeling, but she brushed it off as childhood imagination. The next night, Amara woke in the middle of the night, walked into her mother's room, and stood by the bed. "Mom, do you hear knocking?" she asked. "No, baby, no one's there," Rayna replied, pulling her close, but Amara wouldn't lie down. She clutched her puppet, stepped back toward the door, and said, "If you smell cigars and shiny shoes, don't open it. That's not your friend." Rayna laughed it off, thinking Amara was dreaming, but the smell of cigars, strangely. That night it did drift in through the window. She figured a neighbor was smoking outside. Everything seemed too small, too scattered to form a warning. That final night, Amara asked to sleep in her mother's bed, something she rarely did. Rayna held her close, sang the usual lullaby, and fell asleep from exhaustion. By morning, the bed beside her was empty. The front door stood wide open. Amara and Miss Nowhere were gone without a trace. Later, Rayna would blame herself 1,000 times for not understanding Amara's words. But how could a single mother, living under constant pressure and exhaustion, recognize such fragile signs? The whispers, the puppet, the smell, the drawing now, they were cuts that never healed. And for 9 years after, Rayna retraced them all, as if memory alone could rewrite the ending. The night Amara disappeared, Rayna got home later than usual. Her shift ran long with a late customer. She walked into the apartment near midnight. Everything seemed normal, no signs of forced entry, nothing broken. But one thing made her stop. The front door was ajar, even though she was certain she'd locked it that morning. She didn't think much of it. Closed the door, washed her hands, then walked into Amara's room. The bed was empty, no rumpled blankets, no signs of struggle. And the jean puppet, Miss Nowhere, was gone too. Rayna called out her daughter's name. She ran through every room, opened closets, checked under beds, the bathroom. Silence, a heavy, unnatural silence. Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. She called the neighbors, called the police. The first thing she said on the phone, "My daughter is gone. And I know this isn't a kid just wandering off." Police arrived in 25 minutes. No signs of a break-in. Nothing valuable missing. No strange objects. One officer, the first to enter the bedroom, asked, "Are you sure the door wasn't already open?" That question hit Rayna hard, because she knew. That morning, like every morning, she had double-checked the lock. They searched the building, lit up the alleys with flashlights, brought in scent dogs. But by 3 a.m., there was nothing. Then came the questions. Has she ever run away before? Was there a fight that night? Are you seeing someone new? Rayna screamed. She's only 6. She wouldn't go anywhere in the dark, not without her shoes. As the news spread, people from the neighborhood gathered. One elderly man remembered seeing a gray Lincoln parked at the end of the street around 11 p.m. The car didn't move. No one got out. Then it slowly drove off. A teenager reported hearing soft footsteps and a whisper, "I see you," but to the police, it wasn't enough. No cameras, no clear witnesses, no physical evidence. They didn't issue an Amber Alert, and by morning, Amara's disappearance was written down in a vague report and filed under possible child runaway. Rayna didn't sleep for days. She knocked on doors, put up flyers. She went to every church, every community center. Most people only shook their heads and said, "No one's seen a little girl like that." To Rayna, it felt like the world had exploded, but no one else had heard the blast. That night, Rayna ended her shift at the nail salon later than usual. A regular customer had come in right before closing, just to fix a chipped nail. Rayna smiled and did the work like always. But her chest tightened with worry. She hated being late, especially on Thursdays. The day Amara didn't have afternoon preschool and stayed home alone after dinner, on her way back. Rayna stopped at the corner store to buy the strawberry milk Amara loved, then drove quickly through the empty streets. The kitchen clock blinked 11:34 as she slid her key into the lock. The moment the door opened, Rayna knew something was off, not because of noise or disarray, but the smell. The usual cinnamon scent she always sprinkled on the floor was gone. In its place was something faint and unfamiliar, like old fabric laced with tobacco. She stepped inside and turned on the lights. Everything looked normal. Amara's little sandals were still by the shoe rack. Her backpack leaned against the wall, but the front door, the one Rayna had locked that morning, was slightly ajar. She called out Amara. No answer. She rushed into the bedroom. The bed was untouched, the pillow neat, as if no one had slept there. The yellow comforter hung off one corner, on the desk. The box of crayons was open, but one thing was missing. Miss Nowhere. Rayna tore through the closets, under the bed, the kitchen, the bathroom. Each time she called her daughter's name, her voice grew hoarse. Fear clenched her chest tighter and tighter. By the time the police arrived, Rayna was sobbing. They fired off questions. Does anyone visit often? Do you have enemies? Any issues with the locks? Has your daughter ever talked about running away? Rayna said the same thing over and over. No, no one. She's only 6. She handed them a photo of Amara at her recent birthday yellow dress. Big smile, holding up her puppet like a prize. Officers scoured the building. One found faint footprints near the back door but said, "Could be old." They brought in scent dogs. But by 1 a.m., a light rain had started, washing everything away. When Rayna asked about an Amber Alert, the lead officer replied, "We don't have enough evidence for an abduction. Maybe she wandered off." The words hit Rayna like a slap. She thought, what 6-year-old walks out in the middle of the night with a puppet? Not shoes by morning. News of Amara's disappearance spread like wildfire. Neighbors gathered at Rayna's home with coffee. Blanket some came just to hold her hand. Others cried when they saw the small bike still parked on the porch. In this tight-knit black community, a missing child wasn't just one mother's grief, it was everyone's. But the official response didn't reflect that unity. A team of 3 investigators showed up by noon, asking the same old questions, bringing forms and stiff voices. They took notes, but refused to issue an Amber Alert. No clear signs of abduction. They suggested checking trash bins and interviewing a few neighbors, then left. Rayna stood frozen at the door as the patrol car reversed down the narrow lane, as if taking the last shred of hope with it. Meanwhile, whispers began to spread in the neighborhood. An older man said, around 11 p.m. that night, he saw a gray Lincoln parked under a tree with its lights on dim. He remembered it clearly. A bald man with dark skin and a white shirt never stepped out, just stared toward Rayna's home. Then he drove away, with the blinker still on. Rayna gave this to police, but they couldn't confirm no public cameras, and the gas station nearby only kept footage for 72 hours. The case wasn't serious enough yet for a subpoena. Rayna went door to door with Amara's photo. A 15-year-old boy said he was sneaking a smoke on the porch that night and heard a child whisper, "I see you." He wasn't sure it was real, but it haunted him so much he couldn't sleep. Rayna clung to every detail like a life raft, but the deeper she dug, the more she felt the cold indifference of the system. Every time she called for updates, the answer was the same: "We're still looking into it." 3 days later, Rayna organized a volunteer search. The police sent one officer for security. No dogs, no drones, no support. To the system, it seemed a missing black girl from a poor neighborhood just didn't make headlines. That third night without Amara, Rayna sat alone on the porch. She hadn't truly slept in 72 hours. Every passing car made her jump to the door. She didn't feel the cold or drizzle, just a growing emptiness in her chest. She was a shadow now, clinging to a world already forgetting her child. Nearly 30 people came to help search: neighbors, churchgoers, friends. They split into groups, combed the nearby park, knocked on doors of abandoned homes. One experienced woman told Rayna, "If we don't find them in 72 hours, chances of survival drop in half." Rayna said nothing. She just clutched Amara's photo tighter, like she could pour all her energy into it. On day 4, a new lead emerged. A homeless man who often stayed near the gas station said he saw a man help a little girl in yellow pajamas into a gray Lincoln. The man wore a light gray suit, a fedora, and had a northern accent. When Rayna came to speak with him, he sat shivering in a tattered coat, holding a cold can of soup. "I'm not lying," he kept saying, but police dismissed him unreliable witness. They said desperation turned to rage. Rayna stormed into the precinct, demanded the late investigator. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "If my child were a white girl from a rich neighborhood, what would you have done?" No answer. Just a seat and empty promises. "We're doing our best." But Rayna knew no one was fighting for Amara but her. Those first 3 days were a nightmare, and they left Rayna with a hard truth: the system was built to protect kids like hers. Her faith in justice cracked, but instead of breaking, she gripped it tighter. If no one would listen, she would speak. If no one would search, she would search. And from that moment on, the 9-year journey of one mother alone began. 9 years passed. Rayna moved 3 times, switched jobs twice, and lived like someone carrying half a soul. She never left East Point. It was as if her heart was still shackled to the place her daughter vanished, though people urged her to start over. Rayna never took down the photo of Amara from her kitchen wall, nor threw away the wrinkled paper where her daughter had once scribbled, "Mom, you are my sunshine." She lived, but never really lived. Every year on May 14th, the day Amara disappeared, Rayna baked a chocolate cake and left it on the windowsill, as if waiting for someone to come home. Her latest move to a small complex in the north side was purely financial. The rent was cheap, while unpacking old boxes. Rayna opened one labeled donation clothes things she meant to give away. Her hand brushed against something soft and familiar. When she pulled it out, her heart nearly stopped. It was the jean puppet Miss Nowhere, still with the two button eyes and purple-stitched mouth. But now, something new was sewn into its back, a patch of fabric, with stitching that wasn't hers. Red thread spelled out one message: M knows. Rayna froze. Her hands trembled as she clutched the puppet, whispering her daughter's name like a prayer. She checked the box, no return label, no note. No one knew she'd moved. But she knew one thing: this wasn't random. It couldn't be. The puppet had disappeared with Amara. And now, it was back like a message. Someone, maybe even Amara, was trying to lead her somewhere. Rayna took photos of the puppet, printed flyers. She went back to her old neighborhood, stopped by every laundromat and thrift store, asking if anyone had seen it. Most didn't recognize it. But at a rundown gas station, the same one Rayna used to visit years ago, someone did. An elderly woman with trembling hands looked at the photo for a long time, then said softly, "I remember a man with a gray Lincoln. He smoked cigars, hummed jazz while pumping gas, always wore sunglasses, even at night." Rayna felt heat rush through her. "Do you remember his name?" she asked. The woman thought hard, like dusting off an old memory. "I think it was Marvin. Can't recall the last name. Said he did plumbing and electrical work. Polite man. No one suspected a thing." Marvin, a name Amara had once mumbled as a child, now echoed like a warning from the past. Rayna remembered the name. Neighbors used to mention a man who offered free electrical repairs. Everyone liked Marvin. Tall, soft-spoken, always in a white shirt with a gold watch. One Thanksgiving, he brought homemade pie to every home on the block, with that charming image. Marvin never seemed suspicious, until now. Rayna started retracing her steps and the memories of others. She visited Miss Clara, who used to babysit and clean homes in the old neighborhood. Clara, now frail and in a wheelchair, still had sharp eyes. When Rayna mentioned Marvin, she paused. "Yes, I remember him. Kind man. But once I saw him standing outside your door. Just standing. Like he was waiting," Rayna asked. "When was this?" Clara wasn't sure. Close to when it happened. He was holding something, a toy. Maybe I thought he was bringing it to his kid. That detail took Rayna's breath. She remembered the drawing Amara once made a man in a red vest. No face. Standing in a corner. Mom's friend. She called him. Maybe Marvin had approached her daughter. Maybe he wasn't a stranger at all, but someone the community had overlooked. Rayna approached another former neighbor, Mr. Wallace, who'd lived across the street for 15 years. When she said Marvin's name, he looked puzzled. "Yeah, he fixed our wiring once. Seemed nice. But now that you say it, after Amara disappeared, he vanished too. Nobody noticed at the time. He didn't live nearby. But he was just gone." Rayna was stunned. If Marvin was involved, why had no one traced him in 9 years? Was it because he wasn't on any suspect list? Or because no one had connected the dots? She realized the truth doesn't always hide in darkness. Sometimes it's scattered in overlooked memories, hesitant glances, forgotten details. She began writing down every name, every address, every thread. Marvin was no longer a vague memory. He was a path, and at the end of it might be the answer to the biggest question: is Amara still alive? For weeks, Rayna became a full-time investigator, unpaid, driven by instinct and hope. She quit her part-time job, used her savings to print new flyers. This time, not just Amara's photo, but a sketch of a middle-aged man in sunglasses, suit jacket, and bold letters. "Marvin, does anyone remember this man?" She canvassed old neighborhoods, electrical shops, thrift stores, gas stations, even abandoned buildings on the city's south side. Most people just shook their heads. Some looked at her with pity, as if to say, "Let it go." But one day, at a dusty old electrical supply store, she met Clyde, a middle-aged man who frowned at the sketch. "I worked with him," he said, "back in 98, or 99. He called himself a freelance electrician. Skilled guy, quick, never charged extra. But something was off." Rayna leaned in, off how Clyde hesitated. He never let anyone touch his tools. Always had this red toolbox. Cleaned his hands with his own towel, like he didn't want to leave prints. He also recalled Marvin mentioning a place where he kept important stuff, an old storage building on the western edge of the city. "Don't know if it's real, but he said, no one bothers me there." Rayna noted everything. She dug through land records, scoured Google Maps, and combed through tax reports. She found a long-abandoned warehouse once privately owned, unused for over 15 years. It sat 40 minutes outside East Point. No direct road, only a dirt path through the woods. When she arrived, clouds loomed. Cold wind rustled the trees like whispers from the past. The door was rusted, but the lock was new. She broke it open with bolt cutters and stepped inside. Mold, dust, silence. But in one corner, footprints, scratch marks on the wall. Rayna called out Amara. Her voice trembled with hope and terror. No answer. But inside a wooden drawer, she found something. A handkerchief stitched with the initials AJ. The same fabric Rayna had sewn for Amara back in kindergarten. And next to it, a torn scrap of paper with one line. "She still remembers Mom." Rayna stood frozen in the dark. Her heart broke and came alive. After 9 years, a trail once thought cold now burned bright again. Marvin wasn't a ghost. He was real. And her daughter, maybe, just maybe, was still out there, waiting to be brought home. After finding the handkerchief embroidered with AJ and that chilling scrap of paper in the warehouse, Rayna returned home shaken but certain her daughter might still be alive. And Marvin, the once polite handyman, was just a friendly electrician. He was the central piece of a mystery that had been ignored for far too long. Rayna brought the evidence to the police station. At first, they accepted it like just another formality. But this time, a young detective officer, Latasha Green, froze when she read the words. She still remembers Mom. Green, the only black officer on the team, had followed Amara's case since she was a teenager. She decided to reopen the file and uncovered something disturbing. Marvin, full name Marvin J. Beckett had records in 3 different counties over a 20-year span, but no one had ever connected them. One complaint for inappropriate behavior with a minor in Clayton County in 1993, no charges filed due to lack of evidence. Another indicator, he was seen loitering near an elementary school playground during lunch hour. When questioned, Marvin claimed he was looking for a lost dog. The report was dropped within 2 days. Green didn't believe in coincidences. She dug deeper and found Marvin had registered as a freelance repairman, using at least 14 different addresses over a decade, all clustered in working-class neighborhoods south of the city. Areas where police presence was light and oversight even lighter. Rayna sat in silence as Green laid out the findings. Every odd phrase Amara had once said was now clicking into place. Her daughter hadn't imagined the man in the corner wearing a vest. Not at all. She'd seen him, possibly even spoken with him, and she'd tried to warn her mother. But one detail chilled Rayna even more. In a forgotten appendix from the 1998 case file, a neighbor had reported a man standing near the Johnson window for 3 nights in a row. The description matched gray Lincoln, white shirt, cigar smoke, That call had never been forwarded to the lead investigator, Rayna asked. Why didn't anyone follow up? Green didn't answer. She just shut the file slowly, her eyes burning with both fury and regret. The truth was, Marvin had always been there, hiding in plain sight, wrapped in trust, masked with a smile, and gone before anyone thought to question him. As Rayna and Officer Green began reaching out to people who had once received help from Marvin, the first reaction was disbelief. No one wanted to believe that the man who'd once fixed their fuse boxes, brought light bulbs to old Miss Johnson during a storm, could be involved in a child's abduction. Marvin? No way. Mr. Wallace, the neighbor across the street, shook his head. He fixed our plumbing once during the holidays. Didn't charge a dime. But when Rayna mentioned that Marvin disappeared the same week Amara did, and recounted the scattered reports that were never linked, his eyes shifted. I don't really remember. But yeah, I guess no one saw him after that. Miss Clara was different. She wasn't surprised. I always felt something cold in his eyes, like he looked through people, not at them. She recalled how Marvin always wore gloves even in the summer, how he once declined a glass of water on a hot day, saying, "I don't trust tap water." Harmless quirks back then, now terrifying fragments. Across town, at a rundown complex where Marvin once did short-term maintenance work, a woman named Shanice shared how he knew how to make you feel seen. She had once asked him to check her circuit box, and Marvin had stayed to chat about family, even asking what grade her kid was in. He felt like a wise father figure. She whispered, "But now I wonder, maybe he was just figuring out which homes had kids." The painful truth was this: Marvin didn't break in. He didn't use force. He walked in through kindness, wearing the mask of a good man. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He was hiding in trust. And that made what he did all the more sinister. Rayna realized something awful when a community is taught to see help. They will protect the helper, even if it means ignoring the harm. To admit Marvin's guilt meant admitting they had failed to see a child in danger. Green compiled every testimony and officially listed Marvin as a prime suspect. But he remained missing. No bank records, no new address, no known relatives. It was as if Marvin, just like how he came, had vanished into thin air. For Rayna, this was no longer just an investigation. It was a war against silence. The same silence Marvin had wrapped around himself for years. With official routes stalled, Rayna knew she had to think not like a victim, but like a mother, like a soldier. She returned to the warehouse where she'd found Amara's handkerchief. This time, she looked closer. On the rotting wooden walls were faint carvings lines, circles, and rusty nail-scratched letters, M.A.N. Officer Green suggested bringing back the Miss Nowhere puppet to test for fingerprints. Surprisingly, the results came back mixed: Rayna's prints, old child prints, likely Amara's, and one unfamiliar print. It matched a 1992 file Marvin J. Beckett, briefly detained in Baton Rouge for loitering near a school after curfew. Rayna almost collapsed after all these years. Proof Marvin had once touched that puppet. Green broadened the search, checking everywhere Marvin had worked. In a construction bid from 1996, she found Marvin had signed a contract to do electrical work for an old summer camp on the western outskirts nearly an hour from the city. The camp had closed after a small fire in 1998 and had been abandoned ever since. Rayna and Green decided to go. The road to the camp felt like a different world: no cell signal, no streetlights, just wind rushing through pine trees and dirt trailing behind. The wooden gate hung loose. The camp sign was half missing. Scattered cabins rotted among moss-covered grass. But one building, the central one, had signs of recent entry, a new lock. Tire tracks in the dirt. Rayna went in first. The air was damp, musty, but not empty. In one corner, a bed, some unopened canned food, and a small AM radio playing a lullaby on repeat. "You are safe here. You are safe." Her heart seized. She called out Amara. No answer, but in a rusted metal cabinet. Green found another handkerchief, this one purple, embroidered with new words. "Mother is close." Rayna dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with certainty. Marvin had been here. Amara had been here. And they hadn't gone far. She stood up, eyes blazing. This wasn't doubt any more. She was standing at the edge of the place where memory had been locked away. And that door was about to open. 2 days after finding the handkerchief embroidered with the words "Mother is close" in the abandoned summer camp, Green and Rayna returned to the site, this time with an official search warrant and local police support. They brought in cadaver dogs, heat scanners, and infrared cameras. The search combed through every corner of the wooden buildings, including the damp basement beneath the main cabin. It all seemed hopeless until one of the dogs stopped near the kitchen wall, let out a sharp whine, and began to claw. Behind the wall was a narrow passageway leading to a hidden underground cellar. No light, no windows, only the chill of earth and years. Under flashlight beams, they found a small square room walls draped in black fabric, floor carpeted in old rugs. In the middle, a small bed with a dark yellow blanket, and next to the bed, a girl, curled up, a sleer perhaps, no longer quite a girl. She stirred when the light hit her face. Her deep brown eyes widened for a moment, then narrowed with caution. She sat up quickly, her body trembling, but her face calm. Her long hair was tangled and greasy, but she was clearly not neglected. Her clothes weren't new, but clean. On her right wrist was a red string, neatly tied, subtle, but chilling sign of control. Rayna screamed her daughter's name and surged forward like pulled by instinct, but the girl flinched, held out a hand as if to stop her. "Who are you?" she asked. The voice wasn't that of a child, nor quite an adult. It had the calmness of something rehearsed, as if the voice didn't belong to her at all. "Amara, it's me. I'm your mother. Don't you remember me?" Rayna sobbed, moving slowly forward. The girl stared at her face. For a moment, her lips parted, and a whisper like a breeze escaped. Mom Green signaled the officers to hold position. She stepped forward gently, like approaching someone waking from a long dream. But when they asked the girl, "Who brought you here?" her answer froze the room. "No one. I live here. I don't know if the world outside is even real." "What's your name?" Green asked. "Amara Beckett," she replied. Rayna froze. Beckett Marvin's last name, and the faint smile that flickered on Amara's lips a strange, distant smile felt like something caught between waking and never having slept. Once removed from the cellar, Amara didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't react like people expected a girl kidnapped for 9 years would. She stayed quiet, clutching the red string around her wrist like a talisman. When Rayna tried to hug her again, Amara leaned away. Her eyes, no longer a child, studied her mother like a stranger. At the Victim Support Center, Amara underwent a full medical exam. Physically, she was healthier than expected, no signs of abuse, no malnutrition, but psychologically, she was a locked maze. When asked about her childhood, Amara only said, "I grew up here. It was just Uncle Marvin. He told me my mom left because the outside world is cruel." That line stabbed Rayna like a knife. She'd imagined the reunion 1,000 times, thought love would erase the years. But reality was colder and far more complicated. Amara hadn't just been taken. She'd been taught to distrust her, taught to call the man who kidnapped her uncle. Officer Green sighed when she heard the statement. This is classic grooming long-term psychological manipulation. Marvin didn't just hide her physically. He reshaped her memories, created a replacement world where he was the only person who could be trusted. Rayna couldn't bear it. She tried reminding Amara about Miss Nowhere, the puppet she once adored. But Amara shook her head. I didn't have toys. I had books. Uncle Marvin read to me. Green tried a different method. A memory specialist replayed the lullaby from the basement. You are safe here during therapy, as the song played. Amara went still. Her hand clenched. Her eyes shut tight. A single tear rolled down. But she didn't cry out. She only whispered, Please don't make me leave. It's cold out there. Behind the one-way glass. Rayna pressed her hand against the chilled surface. She didn't know if she was crying for the daughter who survived or for the one she might never fully get back. She wanted to scream, to cling to any shared memory. But only silence remained. A trauma expert concluded, she had lost her memories. She's been taught to distrust them. Rayna understood now. The fight was over. Finding her daughter was the finish line. It was the beginning of reclaiming her heart, her memory, and a truth that had been twisted for nearly a decade. And maybe Rayna, too, had to redefine herself not just as a mother searching, but as one standing at the edge between two worlds, the real one and the one Marvin built to keep her daughter prisoner. 1 week after her rescue, Amara still kept her distance. She was placed in a specialized trauma care facility where Rayna could visit, but not interact directly. Experts recommended giving Amara space to rebuild her own perception. Forcing memories too soon could trigger resistance. But Rayna couldn't sit still. One day, she left something outside the therapy room, the Miss Nowhere puppet. No note, no explanation, just left it there, one leg folded, head tilted sideways, like a love twisted by time. 3 days later, when Rayna returned, the puppet was gone. That evening, Amara asked to see Rayna alone. She sat across the table, light casting gentle shadows over a face caught between girlhood and womanhood. She didn't make eye contact, but her voice was softer. Are you real? She asked. Rayna nodded, unable to speak. Amara continued, whispering like she feared someone might hear. He used to say if I remembered you, someone would get hurt. I didn't understand, but now I see it in dreams. You're holding the puppet, standing in the rain. It was the same dream Rayna had, not once, but hundreds of times. Green brought the final update. Marvin had been arrested 100 miles away, at an abandoned church where he posed as a maintenance worker. He didn't resist, but in his coat pocket were 2 things: an old photo of Amara smiling at age 5, and a notebook. Inside were names, mostly black women with addresses, and the birth years of their daughters. All of them had once had a missing girl. No one knows what Marvin planned next. During interrogation, he said only one sentence: I just kept them safe from the cruel world. But what chilled Green was the final page of the notebook. A scribbled, frantic scrawl she's starting to remember. She's not like the others. Her mother calls to her in dreams. Must leave. No one knows who the others were, where they are, if they're alive. And Marvin has said nothing since. For Rayna, those words weren't an ending. They were confirmation that a mother's love had pierced every false wall Marvin had built. Amara might never be the same. But now, she knew she had been taken, and she knew someone had never stopped coming for her. And during a weekend therapy session, for the first time, Amara reached across the table and took Rayna's hand. No words, no tears, just a touch. But in that touch was an entire world. Amara now lives with her mother in a small apartment on the city's south side. She's enrolled in a special support program for children recovering from long-term trauma. She still can't fully remember the lost years. She still struggles to call Rayna Mom naturally, but she chose to reclaim the name Amara Johnson, dropping the last name Bequetas if cutting the final chain tying her to the man who manipulated her. Rayna still keeps a photo of 6-year-old Amara beside her daughter's current picture as a reminder that she was once lost, and somehow found again, even if not completely. No one teaches you how to be a mother to a child who's been kidnapped for almost a decade. She said, "But I know one thing love doesn't need her to remember. Love just needs her to still be breathing." The case of Marvin Beckett sent shockwaves through the community. For over 20 years, he had lived in plain sight, shielded by trust and the blind spots of a broken system. Dozens of cases are now being re-examined. Children once dismissed as runaways, as troubled, or simply labeled untraceable. Most of them were young black girls, from forgotten neighborhoods, from families nobody listened to. No one knows how many victims there really were. No one knows how many memories Marvin erased, how many names were never spoken again. Marvin never gave another statement. He died in county lockup 2 months later from a heart attack. No suicide note, no confession. Just a long trail of unanswered questions and cracks that may never heal in those left behind. On a quiet spring afternoon, Amara and Rayna stood before the overgrown field where the summer camp once stood. Amara knelt, placing the Miss Nowhere puppet gently on the earth. She said nothing, but when Rayna asked, "Are you ready to go home?" Amara replied, "You go first. I'll follow." It was the first time she had called Rayna Mom since her return. And maybe, for Rayna, that was enough. How many Marvins are still out there, walking among us? How many missing children have never been called by their true names? How many mothers like Rayna are still searching for their children vain, in the silence of the system? And in the shadow of their own communities, did Marvin act alone? Or was he just one thread in something larger? And what do you believe kept Amara alive? Faith, memory, or something else?